Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Corks and Quarter Notes. Today we'll be talking with filmmaker and musician Sheilava. She'll be sharing with us some stories from her experience as an independent filmmaker and musician. Additionally, the link between music and film, as well as creativity more broadly. So, thank you once again so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And why don't we start just by having you give us a sort of brief bio about like who you are so that everyone kind of knows where we're starting from.
No problem. Thank you, John. So, I like to describe myself as a creative, first and foremost. Entrepreneur is another fun word people like to use, but I think the creativity aspect that I put into and take out of everything I do is the most important. And I do a lot of different things. One week I might be directing or assistant director on a film. I songwrite a lot, whether it be commissions for film projects or just for fun, just to collaborate. I have a band. It's a 5-piece indie electro swing pop band here in Austin. And then aside from all of that, I also teach. I love teaching kids flute, piano, acting lessons, songwriting lessons. And I work with the nonprofit Anthropos Arts, which is a program in Austin that gives free music lessons to at-risk and underprivileged kids. So in a nutshell, I do a bunch of different things, but I would say at the heart of all of those things, just, creativity and passion is what I'm all about.
So, did you like start with the music and then move to the film?
Yes, I went to school for a flute performance degree, if I'm being very technically correct, University of Houston. And actually, that's also where Lizzo went for a while.
Nice,
So we,
nice.
we like to brag about that 'cause she was also in the flute program there. I graduated class of 2012 and then went to the University of New Mexico for grad school. Started with music there. I always pictured myself performing in a military type ensemble
Mm-hmm.
with a very huge slash unrealistic dream of one day
Yep.
performing as a piccolo player for the president's own Marine band. That was I know it's like super specific,
That
but
was very.
super random. Also, I was just kind of an extreme band nerd growing up, and especially obsessed with piccolo. In addition to the flute, I had a couple friends that used to call me the little flute machine because I just did not stop playing. And everywhere I went, I carried my flute with me like a big nerd. But yeah, that was kind of my big dream all throughout my childhood and going into college. And it wasn't until I moved to Boston and, was kind of immersed within the real world, realized how cutthroat it was and how impossible it was to realistically pursue that dream. My, then boyfriend slash fiance, now husband, took it upon himself. He's also a musician, by the way, took it upon himself to switch majors, right? He was doing classical trombone. He switched his career goal, not his major, his career goal, went into tech. We ended up in Austin. And it was when we moved to Austin that I started to branch out creatively, form a band, start writing my own music, put the passion that I put into flute into that one thing. And I just put it into anything and everything that came my way. Really long story short, after explaining all of that, I got into modeling, filmmaking, songwriting, working on random projects like, I shot a commercial for duct tape and I shot a commercial for this business solutions company in San Antonio, working on other fun things. Like currently I'm songwriting for this comic book series, soon to be anime, crossing fingers that goes well, stuff like that. I think that's how I ended up here, just like the utter defeat of not having made it into the president's own marching band and just saying, well, if I can't, make that dream happen, I'm just going to go any other route. And it's kind of brought me here to all of these different, possibilities. And I love it. I love how ever changing it is.
Yeah, it's really cool. So a transition from being this highly specialized woodwind player, now you're more of like a jack of all trades. You do all these different cool things. It's really interesting. I think a lot of people don't really understand what it takes to get those sorts of jobs. I remember hearing once, I can't remember who this was, but it was a violin player, and someone was like, I would give my life to be able to play the violin like that. And the violinist is like, I have. It truly takes everything. Like, you can't, there's really no room for anything else in your life if you really want to go like that. And that's,
Yeah. And, sometimes I look back and I'm like, if only I did not work, or I did not have to work a part-time, full-time job, whatever. If only I had not gotten into fitness or, XYZ, I could have devoted that much more time to flute, and maybe I would have had a chance, landing that dream job. You never know. But also, we are where we are, and it is what it is. And regardless of where you are or what it is, you need to make the most of it. So I'm also so blessed, so thankful, so happy to be where I am now, even though it's not what I originally wanted or originally thought I would be doing. I look back and I'm like, would I have been happy after all if I was just playing piccolo forever? I don't know. So
I don't think I've met a single person who ended up where they thought they were going to. So you're in good
yeah,
company.
yeah, the fun life.
The umbrella term you used was, what was it?
Yeah. I
Creativist?
when I
Or
try
how
and
would you say
describe
that?
myself to people, I would say I'm a creative. And then, dot dot dot, people, if they want to know more, they're curious what that entails, then I kind of go off the rails from there.
Okay. And so given that big umbrella, how many like subcategories would you say? Big subcategories.
Branches off, to writing, directing, maybe working as crew one day. And the film side branches off to in front of the camera and behind the camera, because I do a lot of acting as well, but I also love being a part of the crew. For instance, there was this series that filmed kind of at the end of 2020, called Panic. It was an Amazon original, and I worked as part of the COVID compliance crew for that huge film set, right? And I loved every second of it. And we're just working with all these A-list actors and making sure they don't have COVID, but you're submerged, excuse me, in this extremely fast-paced, extremely high energy, and sometimes tense film scene, right? And then other times I'm acting, and I love that. I kind of think I'm a little goofy. I'd like to describe myself as goofy, but when I'm playing a character, I can become anything, right? I can channel all the energy and all my passion into that character, that story. So I would say under the umbrella, there's music and then filmmaking, and then it kind of splits off into in front of or behind the camera. On the music side of things, I love writing, songwriting, performing live, and I absolutely love singing. And then, of course, any chance I have to play the flute, I do that.
So, of those two categories, if we're looking at like a Venn diagram of sorts, the overlap of the two, do you think that the filmmaking side helps with the music side and vice versa? Do you think there's anything you can take from the filmmaking and help with music?
Yes, I think the overall connecting piece is storytelling, 100%. Or, the language of it all, like trying to get across a message or a feeling, an emotion. You can do that with songwriting. You can do that when you perform live. You can do that when it's a recorded performance and you have to do take after take after take after take. And then even in the editing process, right? Even in the first draft, the second draft, the third draft, you change the story from there. You change how it looks, how it sounds, how it feels. But in the end, whether you're doing music or you're doing film, you're telling a story, you're sharing an emotion, you're speaking a language in a variety of ways, and I like to talk about the word color a lot, right? How you color a song or how you color a film, how you color a conversation. And so I think the ability to do one with music, songwriting, performing live, and then the ability to do the other, writing a script, uh, you know, hiring your crew, casting the roles, filming it, editing it, scoring it. And then you also have the coloring process there. But as an overarching term, you're adding color to your story throughout, from pre-production to post-production. And I think that whole process is what makes both of these art forms so unique and so fun.
To drill in a little bit there on the word coloring, what you mean by that. So, for example, we had an episode not long ago where we talked about the storytelling element of classical music, and we analyzed some classical pieces and how they worked as like a story arc. We talked about color in terms of the sound texture and the timbre of the different notes. So, like, really the difference between, I mean, no, I don't have to tell you this, but like a violin and a flute, they're very different textures, very different colors, and they can play the same melody, the same rhythm, and everything else, but the different timbres will kind of color it in a very different way. Are you using this in a similar way, or are you sort of doing a side adjacent definition? What do you really mean when you're talking about coloring stuff?
I would say that is part of what I mean when I say coloring, capturing the aura, the personality, and I love the word texture as well. And it's funny you chose that word. Where I grew up on the south side of San Antonio, my director said timbre. And I was like, well, why is it spelled like this? And he's like, trust me, I know what I'm talking about.
I think that is correct. That was, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, and just using all these descriptive terms to say the same thing, you're just trying to personify something, right? The story, the character, the theme, the mood, the message. I think any of those terms work. And then as far as music goes, the texture of the violin or the texture of the flute, or if a tuba were to play it, right? It's all going to sound completely different. But I like talking about these art forms and the idea of coloring something to tell, I guess, to tell people that you're passionate about it, right? It's not just a job. It's not just a to do. It's not just an endeavor. It's like, it's a true art form. It's not just work to me, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It's more creative than that. So
it's not the like assembling of the frame and the skeletons necessarily, but it's the filling it out into like a personality is kind of what you're.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're both important, of course. You need the technical aspect to be there as well, right? The hours you put into creating the skeletal structure to a song, the hours you put into writing a script or casting it, right? You have to do all these casting calls, or you have to create a breakdown, a call sheet, a production schedule. All those technical aspects are just as important. Same with music. The technique needs to be there. So, but then the best part, or my favorite
or the part that interests you, yeah.
Yeah, is the coloring.
Right. So whenever you're like learning music or an instrument or something, you drill in the scales, right, over and over, and you kind of get the scales down pat. But whenever you're writing music, you're not playing scales, right? you're playing music.
I love that you brought up scales. I love that. So I teach my students all the time. It's one of the main themes in our lessons, especially my flute players, is making scales a part of your daily routine, right? It can be monotonous, it can be redundant, but learning how to make them musical and learning how to embrace them and to love them they're not just scales anymore, right? You want to be able to do both. And I think drawing those parallels between, let's just say, scalar passages in a songbook, or, all the technique you have to learn for songwriting or performing with a band, all the technical aspects that go into filmmaking, it can be very much the same thing, right? It can be redundant, it can be monotonous, it can be boring. I've met so many bands who they're just like plugging away show after show after show, and they complain. And then filmmakers who are working 6 to 7 hour days on the Walker show or on Fear of the Walking Dead, and they hate their job. It's like, you can look at it like that, you can suffer through it like that, just like you can when you have to perform scales at a certain tempo, or if you embrace it in a different way, it changes what it means to you. So I love that you brought that up as an example.
I teach guitar and classical guitar as well, and I do the same thing with the scales. And to elucidate this to you a little bit more clearly, Tyler, you can imagine playing a scale like at a certain tempo and stuff, and you have to play it at the specific rhythm over and over again. But you could imagine adding some like dynamic to it, for example, starting really quiet and getting louder as you get through the scale.
Yes.
Emphasizing certain like tones, the tone right before the root note, for example, and you can make it far more interesting. And I think it even adds another layer of technical difficulty to it, 'cause you have to control like the intensity as opposed to just like the pitch and rhythm,
Yeah, I would say all of those things, changing them, controlling them, tweaking them, it can add or take away to what you're doing.
It's really apparent when you watch like a kid play something, and then we watch like a master play something. The child will play the scales and even the music, like even tempo, even rhythm, even intensity. But then you can watch a master just play a simple like major scale, and there's so much that you can do with that. It's amazing.
Yeah, how they might push and pull the rhythm. That happens a lot with I would say my flute students in particular, where they have to learn a specific piece, a piece of classical music, or a Baroque, romantic, whatever, and then I give them recordings to listen to as a reference, and they're like, "But they're not playing with the beat." And
Right.
I'm like, "That's because they're playing music. They're
Right,
embracing
yeah.
it. They're making their own." But how can I get like them if I can't practice like them? I don't know how to play to their beat. And I'm like,
Yeah.
practice it with your metronome and then break away.
You have to learn the rules before you break them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone who started with an instrument at one point didn't know how to play it.
Exactly.
Right.
And even still, a lot of time they are following the rules, and we talked about this actually like our last podcast, where they're following the rules in the larger context. The whole piece is still usually within tempo, but like you said, you give a little bit here and then you speed up a little bit here, and
Right.
Yeah.
That's the coloring. Yep.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a good way of tying that in.
We could start talking about the role of music in film itself. And to start off, I just want to ask you, what kind of roles do you think music plays in film?
Oh my gosh, what a loaded, wonderful question. um, I I think music is so much more important than people realize when it comes to filmmaking. And you can make a great film without music, but I think that word coloring again is a great way to describe how important having an appropriate score or a befitting score is to filmmaking. And if you think of like, okay, we could have a black and white film, or we can color it, we can add different LUTs, we can change the color grading template for this scene versus that scene. Music is the same way. Without it, it may not have the overall mood you're going for, right? When the writer is filling out each scene, and I don't know if writers think like I think, but when I write, I can hear what's happening mood wise in my head, and then later I go in and I compose this or that piece to what I originally heard playing in my head when I was writing. I think it's important because it's just another layer. It's just another color. it's not that you can't make a film without music. It's not that you can't have, certain scenes without music. It's just that much better, I think, to have it at least coming in and out, right? To help add to it. It's like there's nothing wrong with a plain peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And then if you go and maybe swap out almond butter for the traditional peanut butter, go and get gourmet jam or homemade jam instead of HEB brand jelly, it's that much better, right?
Or to maybe use the analogy of coloring, you can do a cool pencil drawing and that can be gorgeous, but
Yeah.
It's not going to be a Monet or something like that.
Right. And there's something to be said about, depending on what you're going for, you want one or you want the other, maybe you want to mix the two. But what drives me nuts, and I think why I argue music is so important, is people will go and just get like templates. They'll go to these websites and either get it for free, which also nuts, or they'll pay a subscription and they'll be like, "Ooh, this sounds fun." They'll just plug it in, and there's no rhyme or reason. There's no thought process behind it. If it if it happens to be exactly what you were picturing in your head, or it's like it really truly does encapsulate what you're going for, then that's cool too. But like so many people just plug and play, and it's the wrong vibe, or it's the wrong speed, it's the wrong key, it's the wrong everything, and it can actually break your film. It can ruin it if it's not right. So anyway.
So I've done this sort of thing before where I'll compose a song, and sometimes I already have the thing. I know like the story I'm trying to tell. Someone gives me a story and I write a song for it, for example, or I have a concept. But then other times I have a song, and then, although I've never done this, but I imagine you have, where you have the song and then maybe you create a story to fit the song. I was wondering what that process is like for you, because you do lots of films, you do music for your films. So how does that process happen for you?
I'll give a couple examples. So 2 years ago, as of yesterday, February 20th of 2020, a friend of mine by the name of Lauren Locks, she told me she had an idea for a film. And then when I showed this to my best friend and film partner, Anton, he's like, this would be great for a single take film. I read the script, I could immediately hear music going on in my head. And so after we, worked it all out, filmed it, and then we got to post production, I'm like, I know what I want to write for this. It wasn't exactly what I heard in my head in the end. I ended up changing it, morphing it, whatever. But that it was just sparked right from when I read the script, right? So in that instance, I think I drew from the mood of the piece, from the emotions that the character was going through in the script, from the roller coaster ride that she was experiencing in the story. And I'm picturing that happening in my head, right? The push and pull of the rhythm, the instrumentation passing from piano to strings to flute, stuff like that. So that's one way I do that. I think in the opposite regard, if I have a song and we want to make a music video out of it, it's kind of like the exact opposite process. We wrote this song, for instance, called Cups for Kings. And it's about college, that game Waterfall or King's Cup. Obviously don't want any I don't know if there's any trademark issues or whatever, but that's why I changed the title to Cups for Kings. And we basically came up with an idea for a music video that was a narrative. We highlight these college kids, getting drunk and being stupid and love triangles everywhere, that kind of thing. And so when we filmed we filmed the music video, it was more like a short film than it was a typical music video of the band just playing, right? It was like an actual story. So that was fun because you can come up with all kinds of themes and I don't know, just different backdrops, different changes, different changes to the set design, to the wardrobe. And then you're basically making the song come alive as a story. Whereas, with other songs we've turned into music videos, it's just the band playing or just me walking down some railroad tracks. It's just like, oh, let's capture the general theme. This is going to be sad, or this is going to be moody, or this is going to be gray, that kind of thing.
That's very cool. So to sort of distill what I think the answer was, no. I just want to try to rephrase some of that, and then you tell me if that sounds right. So you would say maybe the way that you go about composing so as to produce the sort of enhancing feature, maybe sometimes noticed, but ultimately you're just enhancing the overall experience. You would say maybe your main focus with that is to really understand what you're talking about and to really make sure there's a clear connection between the music and the other product, not necessarily just like a tangential one or just like a random one, but it's very focused and crafted for the thing. Would you say that's?
Yeah, of that you said focused and crafted. And I'd say like the devil's in the details type thing, and every situation is different. Every collaboration or every project, every commission, every whatever is different from the one before. And I think giving that attention to detail to every single one in a fresh new way, but also making sure you're thorough, like you said, very focused. And then the craft behind it is applying what makes me passionate, lyricism, coloring, textures, I don't know, just, and then maybe my personality comes out a lot in it sometimes too. I don't know how you describe all of that at once, but I think in a nutshell, yeah, the focus and the craft of it all, regardless of what it is.
Yeah. Very cool.
Is important.
So on the topic of theme songs, I'm just interested in your thoughts. Whenever you're making specifically a theme, in this case for some sort of comic series, how does a theme song particularly differ from like other types of music?
Other types of songwriting?
Like in filmmaking.
Oh.
Like music in filmmaking. Because so my initial observation is whenever you're making a theme song, to the question I was asking earlier, it seems like it does more so want to be sort of like in your face, right? You want to remember the theme song, right, to the comic or the show you're remembering. Whereas whenever you're doing like you're doing the music, just some scene of a random movie or something, you don't really want to remember the music, right? You want to remember the overall vibe of the setting that you were in, right?
I would say both. I would, you can achieve both, you've done it. Now, if you can achieve one or the other, that's great too. But I'll give a couple examples. Well, to answer the first question, yes. So the theme song or a theme song for a film, you would typically hear either at the very beginning as an introduction, the very end during the credits, or maybe, the tail end of the final scene, or during an important moment, whether it's climactic or whether the mood or the tone of the piece is changing, something has happened, and that's a prominent moment in the story or the film, and then cue the theme music, right? And it, again, it enhances the film. It helps kind of drive the nail home, or drive the point home.
Yeah.
Drive the nail in the coffin. I'm trying to say three things at once. But and what you said about like, well, you don't want the song to distract, like you don't want people walking away from the film remembering the song. That's actually what I would love to happen, because there are so many bands I've discovered simply because I watched the movie and I'm like, damn, that song was good. Who are they? I go and look them up and I'm like, back in college, I went through a very short but very intense obsession with Twilight. I'm sure a lot of people have been, but if it was not for Twilight, I never would have discovered Iron and Wine, one of my all-time favorite bands. That's a great example right there. I think one of their songs was playing during a kissing scene, and it's not like the theme song of the series, but it was very important in the direction of that particular scene. And I fell in love with it. And every time I hear that particular Iron and Wine song, of course, I think
Right.
of Twilight. And it's like, ugh. But more importantly, because that song was put in that film at that time, and my little teenage heartthrob crush of what's his face, Edward, and then it just, I attached myself to that song, to that moment, to that character, fell in love with the artists, and now I listen to Iron and Wine on repeat. So it enhances the film. Yes, it gives fans that emotion, an additional emotional connection to the story or to the character. And then if you can simultaneously give them something else to take away from the film, that they can go, and now every time I listen to Iron and Wine, particularly that song, I still think of Twilight, right? And people do that for superhero movies, or even for horror movies. There are songs that people like, you can get chills just by hearing the song because you picture what's happening in that movie.
Well,
So
I'm glad you're on Team Edward and not those infidels, Team Jacob.
hey, I liked him also, but yes.
I mean, he's cool, but Edward's better, obviously. I think that's a great film. That's a good example of sort of the opposite of the things we've been talking about. We've been talking about how music can make films better or worse, but you might have a different opinion. But I think the Twilight films are a good example of films that not so great, but the music's actually quite good. I love the music on that.
Yeah. Again, I'm not saying Twilight, it's not like it was bad or whatever. It's just like I was obsessed with it when I was younger, and I watch it now and I'm like,
It's not great.
a lot. There are a lot of things about it
Yeah.
that are fantastic, but overall, I don't know. Sounds so rude.
Well, I'm sure
like,
from your perspective as an independent filmmaker, you probably have a much better understanding of how these things can go wrong and the good things, and so maybe we should talk about that a
Yes.
little bit.
Yeah. Which things could go wrong?
Yeah, I guess we could just talk about, like, let's just hone in on the filmmaking itself. Whenever you first got into filmmaking, well, I guess the first question is, what are some of the things that what are some preconceived notions you had of filmmaking that came true, and then what are some of the things that you didn't know were in the business until you got there?
The first thing that comes to mind is the difficulty of, I guess, how difficult I thought filmmaking would be. When somebody first asked me, would you be interested in this role? Like, whether you're an actor or not, you were exactly, meeting you and meeting my personality, whatever, you're exactly what I pictured. Would you want to play her? And it's like, I'm not an actress. I don't know what to do, and I get the script and I'm reading through and I'm like, what do? I show up to set. I've never acted before. And I immediately feel this fear, like, this is going to be so hard. What am I doing? What am I doing? And then realizing the way a set is run is very much like the way an ensemble is run, right? The director, the rehearsal, the flow you have to have of stopping and starting and going and doing it again and again and again, just realizing it was not as difficult as I originally imagined. And then on that same note, thinking how much can go into it to make it more difficult, just like any performance, right? Just like any ensemble. The bigger the ensemble, the more intricate the score, or the longer the score, the harder it is, the more time you have to put into it rehearsal wise, right? So if you're playing with a duo or a quintet versus performing with an opera, it's a completely different experience. And it's the same with filmmaking. And I think that's one of the things I love about it the most. It can be super easy, it can be super simple, and then it can also be extremely intricate and mind-blowingly difficult to navigate and to put together. And that's just what I love about it. Every script is different, every story is different, every film set is different. So that's something that surprised me, because you go into it with little experience and you're just like, I'll never be able to do this. This is too hard. And then you realize actually people do this every day. They make indie films, or they, make a music video with one camera guy and the talent, right? The actress. One of my, it's one of my favorite music videos, but I'm told it's one of a lot of other people's favorite music videos. There were only 3 of us on set. We didn't have, months and months of pre-production. We just showed up and we shot it. He edited it in like a week, and then it won, like, I don't know how many awards it's won this far. I think a few dozen. Whereas like some other music videos, we planned for months, and we had 36 people on board, and we had to rent this and buy that and hire so and so and book who's, what's her name, right? It can be as intricate, you make it, and it's ever changing, which is what I love about it.
Yeah. Some of my favorite films are just like one set, maybe 2 characters, like drama. Some of my favorite TV shows and even movies. I feel like the restrictions really do breed creativity in that way. And when you have too many resources, sometimes people get a little complacent, maybe.
Yeah, it can, in any case, it can be great. It can be, it can go awry, or it can just be like you don't connect to the story. So whether it has 2 people or 200 people, if you're not like feeling the vibe of the story, it still won't work for you. It might work for somebody else. I feel that way with a lot of superhero movies, like they're just doing it over and over. Okay, the 90th Superman or Spider-Man or Batman I've watched. Like, okay, I prefer the one I saw when I was in middle school, and I'll just stick to that as my favorite. But yeah.
So you've done so many different types of projects. You have the short films. You have the one cut film you won an award for. There was also, you have music videos and so many different types of projects. And you've been in a lot of filmmaking competitions. You have mentioned several times how a lot of this is subjective and not necessarily right or wrong answers, just how you do things. So what are filmmaking competitions about, and how can those things be judged?
So every filmmaking competition that I've been a part of, well, I would say 99% of them were centered around the idea of making something out of nothing, right? And the challenge was, what can you do from scratch? The single take film you were talking about was a competition specifically for single take films, and that you had you could do whatever you wanted, or if you had previously made a single take film in the past, not intending to do it for this competition, you could still submit it, right? But for a lot of the other ones I've been a part of was for what's called the 48-hour film project. That's the title of it, but it is a competition to see who can create the best story, and best use of character, best script, best display the best acting and the best editing skills, the best score within 48 hours. And so I can talk about that one for a little bit. The idea is you have a blank slate to start. You're given 2 genres to choose from, and each team that enters a competition pulls a genre out of a hat. One year I think the genres we drew were Western or musical, which it's like, if you think about how hard both of those are to create a short film about either a Western or a musical, in less than 48 hours. So you have to write the script, cast all of the roles, or, however many roles you write, rehearse it. Hopefully your director is good. And then you shoot it, you edit it, and if you can, score it, all within a 48-hour time frame. And it's technically less than that because the amount of time you have to wait for these things to render and then get over, you have to submit it online, or I'm sorry, I think you also have to submit a hard copy. It's a blur because you're awake for 48 hours straight, but submit a hard copy on a thumb drive in person. So it's actually much less than 48 hours. But then the way they judge it, to answer your other question, is a couple weeks later, they have a panel of judges go through and they say, okay, everybody's starting from scratch using whatever resources they had available to them. The only other rule, apart from the genres, right, and making sure you do it from scratch, the only other rule is you can't pay anybody. You can't say, oh, I hired Hans Zimmer. you can't
Right.
say I hired Denzel Washington, so we're gonna win. You can't pay any sort of money for services. You can buy equipment or you can rent equipment, but you can't hire so and so to perform or to services or time. And then they judge based on whoever did the best or the most passionate, the most surprisingly blank, and give awards based off that.
So what is, you say like the best story, what makes a story good?
It's so hard, right?
Yeah.
Better than another
one.
one.
Obviously, I've never been on the panel of judges, but
or what's your intuition?
I threw my own.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. I threw my own independent film festival once, and my panel of judges and I came up with a scoring system, right? We give each category a rating from 1 to 10. And I did this too when I was a screener for the Austin Film Fest. You have a whole bunch of screeners determine the first round of films that make it into the film festival to be screened, or to be official selections, screen for the public audience. And we did the same thing from 1 to 10. How well did the plot come across? How great was the directing? How great was the acting? How great was the editing overall? Stuff like that. And so when you determine what the best film is, I think what I'm assuming they do for these competitions is you take whichever film has the most or the highest rating, each of those categories, and then that's the overall quote unquote best film.
So when you say something like the best acting and which plot came across the best, are you saying, is that just does that translate to which of these plots did I like the best and which of this acting performance did I like the best? Is that really where
it could?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm assuming that however big or however many people are on their panel of judges, it might mean something different to each of them. But then the really cool thing that these competitions will always have is an audience choice award. So, just the audience's reaction, whether you're asking them each individually on their phone or to write it down, or, whatever every person votes for. But like, for instance, when I was a screener for Austin Film Fest and I had to give all these different films a rating, and then, my supervisor would see all the ratings, it means something different to me than what it would mean to the next screener and the next screener, right? When I'm listening or watching for different things, how they come across to me will be differently. So you have to take a collection of these scores. So I'm assuming it's not just 1 or 2 judges for these competitions. I'm assuming it's several. And then from there, they take the overall total, or, whichever film did the best across as many judges as they have. And it's funny too, because the film that wins best overall film will not always win a bunch of other awards in addition to that. And what I mean by that is in 2019, the film we submitted, it was a musical that we ended up going with out of those two genres. We won best editing, and we won best use of character, best original music, best cinematography. You know, we won a whole bunch of best ofs, but we did not win best overall film. And the film that did win best overall film didn't win a bunch of those awards. It's interesting how it works. So
does that strike you as like is just like a weird anomaly of judgment, or do you think is it possible for a film to be really good at all these categories but still not be a great film? Or
yes,
okay,
absolutely. That's what I I was so shocked because what happened on our film set in those 48 hours is, you know, it kind of threw us for a loop and sent us scrambling, is our sound operator did not show up, right? We had nobody to capture the sound. And I don't know if you know this, but it's kind of hard to have a full-fledged musical without someone there to capture the sound live. At least the, you know, the dialogue in between whatever music. So we had to go an alternate route at the end and just say, okay, it's going to be like, you know, silent films back in the day where there's music playing throughout, but there's no dialogue. There's nothing that we recorded on the day of. And so I think that had a lot to do with why we won a ton of individual awards. We put as much heart and as much passion as we could into all of these technical elements, but overall, you know, it's missing that live quality of not being able to like sing the songs there in person and on set. They're all just playing in the background. But the fun part is you do what you can with whatever you're dealt, right? The circumstances or the people who chose to show up or the talents you have available.
Well-rounded seems to be a recurring theme for you. You know, we have the contrast of the dedicated flautist versus the well-rounded creative. We have the film with the high degrees of success in certain categories, but the more important thing seeming is the overall picture, the well-roundedness of it. And that seems to be a big part of your theme in all your works, as far as I can tell from this conversation.
You try your best. Yeah, I like, you know, I like checking off boxes, but I also like not living in a box.
Yeah.
Have I done this thing yet? Have I worked on this type of thing yet? Have I worked with so-and-so yet? But also like, I want to do my own thing and I want it to be weird and strange and quirky and wild and whatever, right? Like 0 boxes, 0 rules. So I don't know, just that whole like idea that no matter what you do, just love it, just enjoy it.
One last question. Of all the projects that you've done and been a part of, do you have a favorite? And which one was the hardest one?
A favorite. It's like saying.
And are those the same?
It's like saying a favorite child. How could you? No.
Right. Fair enough. Right. Well, I imagine you took some jobs at some points just from like you just needed a job at the
like,
point, right? I can't imagine those are your favorite.
Like, wow, this pays a lot of money. Yes, please. Thank you. Those are definitely not my favorite. I could say like maybe one of the most meaningful projects.
Sure.
Oh, gosh, and then like 6 come to mind because they're meaningful in different ways.
Maybe just a one. It doesn't have to be the number one, but in the
the
top
first
tier.
Let's give like pick a random of the top 5.
Okay, so the one that comes to mind that kind of stands out the most is a music video I worked on called Blood Moon, for a few reasons. So the song I wrote when I was extremely depressed. I went through a really, really rough period in my life where I had just moved across the country, no friends. I was not doing what I wanted to do. I was working at Bank of America at the time. And I remember getting this fight with my partner that particular day and just like, I can't do this. I can't be here. I can't live here. I just need to move to Australia or something, right? And I left our apartment. I went outside and I sat on a rock under a tree, like this really big boulder. And I was just bawling. And I look up and it was the night of this blood moon, this huge, big red blood moon that was like, a huge deal back in 2015 or something like that. And as I'm looking up at the moon, like in the corner of my eye, I see like a strand of a spider web, like just one single silk strand. And I see this teeny tiny little spider crafting this teeny tiny little web. And again, I'm just like tear streaked and staring at the moon. But then I see this little spider and it hits me like a brick wall. Like, why am I crying? Like, what do I have to be upset about? This little spider is building its home, and think about how many people go and just like crush every single spider they see, or like, ew, a spider web, they knock it down. And what does the spider do? If it's still alive, the spider gets back up, spider gets back up, and they make a new web, right? They keep going, and they make their web not only as their home or their domain, but also to survive, to keep going. And so I like wiped my eyes and I pull out my phone because for whatever reason, as I'm staring at this spider and this little web, there's a melody playing in my head. And I'm like, I need to write this down. And so I have my little note-taking app and my little memo app, recording app, and I'm like humming this melody that's playing in my head. I start writing down these lyrics that are coming to me, and I wrote the song Blood Moon. Fast forward a few years, my guitar friend and I had put the whole song together. We recorded it. It's one of probably my favorite song to date, just because of the passion that I had put into it. But then out of the blue, this amazing cinematographer by the name of Edwin, apologize if I botch his name, Quinones, Edwin Quinones reaches out to me. He's like, oh my God, I love this song. Like, it just spoke to me. I want to make a music video for you. Not, do you want to collaborate, or I charge $6,000, please hire me, but I want to make it for you. And I'm just like, whoa, if something I made, touch somebody in that way, that's all you have to say. And in my head, it's like, I literally had zero expectations, zero requirements, zero thoughts. I'm like, make whatever you want to make. But he was so open. Him and his partner, Benjamin Reddick, showed up. We just put a bunch of stuff together and Blood Moon was born. And so I think that experience as a whole, from start to finish, the what happened when I wrote the song, the way it came about, and then years later, I'm not actively thinking about this song anymore. It's just there on my SoundCloud. And it touched somebody for whatever reasons. I never asked Edwin that, like, why did this song speak to you? That might be personal to him. But just hearing that he felt compelled to reach out to me because his craft, his cinematography, he wanted to create something from that. So the whole experience was probably one of the most rewarding, meaningful, inspiring that I've had.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Those were great stories. I love the Blood Moon story. That was beautiful. And we'll have links to all the things we mentioned here, and then of course to all of Sheilava's stuff. You guys should totally check it out. Lots of really cool music, cool films, and if you're interested in any of that stuff, it's a good place to go check out. Is there any upcoming stuff you would like to plug, or?
I don't know where to start. I'll just say the first one that comes to mind. My best friend and film partner, Anton Savenko, and I are starting our own YouTube channel where we interview Texas creatives. So I like saying that word. Yes, creatives. So whether that means they're a writer, director, singer, songwriter, artist, actor, restaurant owner, cinematographer, or even a techie that's making their own app, whatever, we're going to interview them. So that's in the works. And we have this coming weekend, 5 or 6 people lined up, and we're going to start shooting those episodes. So we're going to be doing the same thing. And I'm really excited for that.
What will it be called?
crooning with the stars.
I like
I'm
it.
like, I hesitated because I'm like,
Right.
am I allowed to say it yet? Oh well, I'm saying it. Here you go.
If you change your mind, we could always go back
Oh,
and cut
true.
things.
So yeah,
All right.
I
Well,
like
thank you.
that word crooning because the music, film, stars. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Perfect.
you both so much for having me. It was a pleasure, both
Yeah,
of
no
y'all,
problem.
and getting nerdy about all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah. Let us know what you guys think, and we'll see you next time.